might be necessary for all of us. I don't think Lexi's caught up on sleep yet from the holiday. She's tired herself out. Right, ladies and oh, so this is unmuted. Just had a little cough then. Do you know what I did? I muted myself instead of everybody else. That'll work much better. See, that bangs my head. It's done lasting damage. Right, now you can hear me. That might work much better. So the feet under the hips, your hands just hanging down by your thighs. And then just pull up through the top of the head so you're making yourself feel a little taller. Now when we naturally stand with the hands hang, you might notice your shoulders drop forward a little. So we're going to start with just some little shoulder squeezes. So if your palms literally face towards the back, I want you to squeeze your shoulder blades together so your palms face to your thighs and let your shoulders separate. So what we're looking for first of all is just a little bit of movement between the shoulder blades. Your palms face the back and then your palms face into your thighs. As your palms face the back, you'll feel your upper back rounds a little. And as you pull your palms back to your thighs, feel your chest lifts. Now sometimes we can stay here and just move the hands themselves. So what we need to think about is actually bringing the shoulder blades together to pull the shoulder blades back. And then take a breath in, let the back round a little. So a couple more there. Just starting to feel the muscles work through the upper back to help maintain posture and keep us nice and upright. So you can see what happens when those muscles lengthen and become a little weaker. So this time as you turn your palms in and bring those shoulder blades together, you're going to then slide your hands down towards your knees. So you feel a nice strong connection around that shoulder blade area. From here, we take a little tuck under with the tailbone, so we're getting our connection between our ribs and our hips. Knees are soft and weight through into the heels. Keep that squeeze between the shoulders, take a gentle sway forward, and then take a sway back into the heels. Now as you're moving, you're trying to get the ears, shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, all in a nice straight line. Again, sometimes you come forward, you might find the upper back rounds and the hands want to change position. So just by keeping the palms facing in and maintaining that connection through the shoulders, it's just going to help to maintain your posture much better. When you're ready, let the heels lift. And then when you sway back, just allow your toes to lift off the ground. If you want to take the movement to another challenge, just close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, you're taking away your visual feedback and making the deeper muscles work even harder to maintain your posture. So from there, a couple more in each direction. That's just giving you a little bit of time to just settle into your body. Become aware of the different muscles you're using to maintain your set position. And then we settle in the centre, in neutral spine, so our tailbone's under. We're going to turn our palms to the ceiling, keeping the ribs down. Take a breath in. As you breathe out, just a gentle squeeze between the shoulder blades. Now, as you squeeze the shoulder blades together, your thumbs point towards the back of the room. What you want to avoid is your arms, your elbows, coming away from your rib cage. The work comes from here, just that little space between the shoulder blades. Now sometimes if the shoulders are a little stiff and there's not a lot of movement around the shoulders, we tend to push the ribs and the hips forward. Thinking about sitting into the heels, keeping the tailbone softly drawn down towards the heels and holding the rib cage slightly down towards the hips. And again, just a couple more here, because it also helps to stretch the front of the shoulders. And your last one. Hands then come down by your thighs. Roll the shoulders back, reach towards the ankles, and then into our side bends. So as we start to ease through the side bends, this is just to encourage movement through the spine. As well as trying to get the movement through the spine, you're trying to think about stability through the hips. Keeping the weight even through both feet. And trying to keep the weight sat into your heels. Nice and relaxed through your toes. And then as you're moving, see if you can take the movement a little bit further. As you're trying to take the movement further, Try not to lift the foot or move the hips to try and make the movement bigger. You're trying to keep everything from your hips and below still like it's been set in concrete, and moving between two panes of glass. Just easing from one side over to the other. Now keeping the chin slightly tucked in, so you're not tempted to poke the chin up towards the ceiling. Once more, over to your left, and then just settling in centre. Bring your right foot in front of your left. So we step into tandem stance, so you can keep a little space between your feet to make it easier. A little harder, your big toe touching the centre of your heel. Back to soft knees and neutral spine, shoulders draw back, arms float forward. Starting with your right arm, elbow pulls back past the rib, open it to the back of the room so you stretch across the front of the shoulder and the chest, and then ease back into the centre. You can keep your eye gaze forward, or you can allow your eye gaze to follow the hand. And that's going to add more rotation through the spine and through the neck. But it also adds an extra challenge for your balance. Now the knees, the toes all stay facing forward. Tailbone still softly drawing down towards your heels. Think about tucking under and drawing the belly button towards the back at the same time. Just be aware that when you reach forward, you're not letting your shoulders come forward of your ears. You want to come back to that set position where it all began. So you've still got that feeling you're able to draw the shoulder blades down towards your back pockets. Now we're going to do that once more on each side. Trying to get the weight evenly placed through both feet. Sometimes it all wants to sit in that back foot to make it easier. Staying here, hands float down. Left foot steps in front of your right. Again, balance your weight. Once you've found your balance, reach up the tailbone, draw the shoulders back and float the arms forward. So you shouldn't be able to see your shoulders out the corner of your eyes. Right elbow back, open, and then easing forward. Find your breath in as you pull back. Now breathe out, draw everything back into the centre. In through the nose, shoulders are down, out through the mouth. Again, keeping the eye gaze forward, or just allowing the head to turn. If you're letting the head turn, again, I want to keep the chin tucked in, so it keeps the length in the neck. Sometimes we tend to let the chin poke up to the ceiling, and you can see then how it puts the neck out of alignment, and it makes it really hard to rotate. The more you keep the chin tucked in, even if it means your head doesn't turn as far, that's fine. It's better to do that than try and encourage the movement in an awkward position. And you'll find by keeping the length into the neck, over time, you'll find that you increase that range of movement and the mobility around the neck. And again, your last one each side. Still trying to keep the weight even through both feet. And from here, just floating the hands back down, roll the shoulders back, and just set your feet back to set position. Hands come onto your hip bones, into your foot pedals, lifting your right heel, ribs and hips connect, and then we're going to alternate the feet slowly. Now, have a feeling that you've got a piece of cotton tied to your head, and it's pulling the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. Now, as you move up and down, you're trying to keep that feeling that the head stays drawn upwards to the ceiling. And that sometimes helps us to stop rocking from side to side. The next thing you start to think about is the movement through the ankles. If you roll onto your little toes, you can see how your knees come out of alignment. So really try thinking about pushing the knee forward and coming up onto the ball of your foot. And as one heel lifts, the opposite heel lowers. At the same time, gently drawing the belly button towards the back. And you can feel with your hands on your hips that the hips aren't rocking from side to side. Once you have that, the next time you lift your right heel, keep your right heel lifted. Then bring the arms forward, drop the shoulders down, hold the ribs and hips towards each other, lift your left arm. When you're ready, we're going to alternate. Now, as we start to add in the arms, work within a range of movement where you don't feel that you have to lift your rib cage to lift the arm. If you feel that your ribs are pushing forward, reduce the range of movement with the arms where you feel that you're keeping that same distance between the ribs and the hips. Breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Still making sure the knees are pushing forward onto the ball of your foot and not rolling towards those little toes. Remembering that piece of cotton tied to the head. Keeps pulling the crown of the head upwards towards the ceiling. And once more each side. And then when you finish your last one, bring it all back in to the centre. Taking our right leg back when we're ready. So from the feet being hip distance, when you step back with your right leg, the feet stay hip distance. Square the hips, and again tuck under with your tailbone so you recreate your square here. Now all we're going to do is bend into the back knee and keep our posture set through the upper body. So your tailbone is tucked, ribs and hips are together, hands onto your hip bones and just ease into your back knee to the point where you feel a stretch here. And then push up out of your front heel. So your tailbone is under, back knee bends, and then you push out of your front heel. That front knee doesn't move backwards or forwards. You lead the movement down to the back knee, and you push up out the front heel. Again, if you're a little tight through your inner thighs and weaker on your outer thighs, you may feel that when you go into your lunge, your back knee slightly rolls in. If that happens, you can see how it tips the hips and it puts the back out of position as well. So it helps sometimes think about that back knee staying gently pressing outwards so it keeps the knee and hip aligned. Now 2 more here, just a gentle breath in, feeling the stretch through the hip flexors, the out breath on the way back up. Now bring the hands back to the thighs. Ease into the back knee, hold here. As you lift the arms, hopefully you feel the stretch increase a little bit more, and then push up out of your front heel. Tailbone under, in breath, breathe out. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Front knee still staying stacked. And into your last 2. Think about the ribs this time. So when you lift the arms, we're relying on our abdominals to keep that connection between the ribs and hips. Sometimes we get to here, and you can see the ribs flare, try and get the arms higher. So again, keeping that nice strong core connection. When you finish your last one, step forward, and then change legs. Let's come back to the hips. So your peace fingers on your hip bones. Take your left leg back, still hip distance. Square the hips and watch where that back knee goes. So it's like the back knee slightly pushes out. That keeps the outer thighs switched on. Posture set, back knee sinks. Front knee stays stacked. And again, the front knee is still also slightly pushing out towards the little toe. You might find sometimes that knee wants to collapse in. By keeping that knee-toe alignment, keeps engagement through the outer thighs, and it starts to create much more stability around your pelvis as well. And then you can enjoy the stretchy part. Tuck under with the bottom. Breathe in, ease the back knee down, feel the stretch, and then breathe out and rise. Still aware of your upper body posture. Sometimes you start to compensate by letting the shoulders come forward. Think about what we did at the beginning. We pulled those shoulder blades back. We squeezed the shoulder blades together so we stay nice and open through the front of your chest and shoulders. As you're doing your lunge, you should be able to still move your toes. So you don't want to feel like you're gripping the floor with your foot or your toes. The toes are light and it keeps the weight into the heel. Then once you've enjoyed the stretch, we can stretch further, hands by your thighs. Breathing in, out with a lift. In through the nose, out on your eyes. Again, tucking under with the tailbone. No change of position, through the upper body. So it also helps to breathe in on the way down. Breathe out as you lift the arms, because it creates more engagement through your core, and it helps to maintain your neutral spine. For your last 2. Last one here. Got me warmed up this morning. And resting, stepping forward with your feet back in under your hips. So the feet a little bit wider than the hips, all 10 toes, ideally pointing forwards, but if you have a natural turnout, allow the feet to turn out a little, but making sure the knees don't roll inwards. Inner thighs tend to come tighter and outer thighs weaker. So these are the important muscles that we need to switch on. Push the knees out towards the little toes. When you do that, you feel the arches of your feet slightly lift. So not only is it switching on the muscles here, it's aligning your feet and getting the muscles working through the feet better too. Neutral spine, hands by your thighs, shoulders back, tummy drawn in. Imagine you have a pole stuck at the back of your t-shirt. Hinge forward from the hips and sit back into the heels. Lift your right arm, ease it down, then your left arm. Press through the heels and hips back under the shoulders. Breathe in, hinge forward, feel the hips sit back, back, back. Tailbone stays tucked. And then as you're lifting the arm, you're making sure the ribs don't lift away from the hips. And that's when we start to really use the upper abdominals. If we keep letting the rib cage lift instead of working through the shoulder, we end up doing a couple of things. We keep lengthening the upper abdominals and not training them to stabilise and hold our rib cage in place. Also, if you're lifting your ribs, you see that you're arching into your lower back. And when you're arching into your lower back, you're lengthening the tummy muscles. So you can always take a second just to think about when you're sat in your squat here, a little scoop under with the tailbone so you feel it pulls the tummy button back towards the spine. And it's just trying to maintain that position as you move the arms. Easy really. Breathe in, tailbone is tucked, out breath with the lift, in breath with the lower. And again, you can reduce that range of movement by just bringing the arm to shoulder height. So it's back to some of the basic movements, but just making sure we're doing them perfectly. So let's have 4 more. Tailbone under. Feel that connection between the ribs and the hips. Press down through both heels evenly. Again, breathing in through the nose. Put the weight back into the bottom, but not that much. And coming in to your last 2. Still feeling the knees gently pressing out towards those little toes. And again, that's really good stability work for the outer thighs and your glute medius that tend to get a little bit weaker if we don't use them properly. And now, you may take away one of your legs. So we're going to come into single leg squats next. Feet come a little bit narrower. We're going to bring the right leg forward, but when you bring your right leg forward, just rest lightly on the ball of your foot to your big toe. Hips are square into your neutral spine and the shoulders roll back. This time you're going to hinge forward again, put your weight back into the bottom, and as you push your bottom back, you're almost feeling a stretch down the back of your right thigh. Sling your neutral spine, lifting the arms, bring it out to the right, into the centre, and then push forward with the hips. So again, breathe in, push the hips back, bend in your left knee, arm comes back to line with the shoulder, and then push through the heel on the rise. Use the breath in, out, in, and rise. Now feel the hip wants to push off to the left a little. So really feel the hips moving directly backwards. Again, remember when we go back, maybe take a little pause, reach up the tailbone, and then push out that left heel. Think about the shoulders. Sometimes you start to really reach the arms forward, it makes the upper back round. Think about drawing the shoulder blades back and down and trying to maintain that position as you sit back into your hips. 2 more. We're going to focus a lot on our glutes today. Get them working quite hard. And rising. Changing legs. So feet back to hips, under hips. Left foot comes forward. Square the hips. Roll the shoulders. Again, if the ribs are flaring, upper abs are lengthened. So I'm going to drop those ribs down a little and draw the tailbone under. So you've got equal connection between the front and the back. When you're ready, ease the hips back. Turn to the left. And then push forward. And again, as you push your bottom back, you're pushing your sit bone back away from the knee. And as you get that feeling of pushing back with the bottom and almost lifting that tailbone up, you're creating a much more stretch down the back of your left thigh. And you can bend deeper into your right leg. But whenever you're ready to come forward, always just gently push down to the right heel and squeeze your bum to drive the hips back in under the shoulders. Okay, your last 3 here. Slow breath in, out, in, and rise. In through the nose, out through the mouth, in, out, push forward. Last time. And then you can set your feet in under your hips. With the feet just staying hip distance, knees are relaxed, let the chin tuck in, tailbone tucks under, and then just roll down through your upper back so your hands come to your knees. And then roll back up through the spine so the shoulders come back above your hips. We're going to breathe in, chin tucks in, hands to knees, tailbones tucked under, so we start to stretch into the lower back and create movement and mobility through the upper back. Now from here you can just keep rolling to the knees, or if you feel you've got a little bit more movement available, maybe soften the knees and letting the hands come a little further, and then restacking your spine and rising with perfect posture. So the breath again, in, and the out breath as you rise. Now I'm just going to go with a couple more there. So on your next one, when you roll down, we're going to stay down. We're going to walk the hands forward and come into a plank position. So from here, as you roll forward, you might want to bend the knees a little bit more to the point where you can bring the hands onto the ground. Walking the hands forward without rocking the hips, and the hands stay underneath the shoulders. So you're going to push the head forward, bring the knees down to the ground. Rest on the tops of your toes. Now we're going to start with a plank from our knees. We're going to gently push the head forward so your chin's forward with your fingertips. Point your elbows back towards your knees so it brings those shoulder blades back together. From here, you're just going to extend your right leg back, in, your left leg, and in. Now we're not in box position, so we're not bringing the knees under the hips. The knees are back behind the hips, your head's forward of the hands, and as you take one leg back and the other, you're trying to maintain neutral spine, so you're holding your belly button up towards the back. Now we're going to work with the opposite hand. You're going to reach it forward and back, forward and back. You can let the little finger rest on the ground, or just a little hover off the floor. 2 more on each side. If you need to rest, just take a little rest, sitting back to your heels. When you have finished your last one, pull the hips back, let the head sink down. You're trying to lengthen the arms, so you can try and walk the fingertips slightly forward. Pull the hips back towards the heels and relax down with the shoulders. So hopefully you're starting to feel a stretch just from underneath your arm down towards your lower back. If you're not quite feeling that stretch there, so you can walk the fingers a little further forward and press down with your fingertips, like trying to hold onto the floor. As promised, a little bit more work from bottom. we're going to lie down this time. So we're going to come face down onto the floor when you're ready. Coming forward, take the knees back, ease yourself down, bending your elbows. So it's just a lowering press up, don't have to push back up just yet. Now we're going to bring the hands forward and we're going to let the forehead rest on the hands when we're ready. So if you want to have a quick look first, from here, as we lie down, we come into a neutral position. We're going to start with the legs first. We're going to lift the knee and then squeeze the bottom to lift a straight leg. Now before we do that, we're going to find your neutral spine. So even though you're lying down, gravity is going to draw your belly to the floor and make your back arch. So once you're here, you're going to draw the tailbone down to the heels, and feel how it brings a little bit more length into the lower back, and it gives you that feeling of lifting your belly button off the ground slightly. Enough so you can put a little egg underneath your belly button. With your knee resting on the floor, squeeze your right thigh so your knee lifts. Without pushing your belly into the ground, you're lifting your right leg. Then the foot comes down and your knee rests. And then the other side. So when you're ready, it's the in-breath to prepare. Out-breath, left knee lifts, and then squeeze the bottom without pressing the belly into the ground. Now the idea is that when you lift your knee and squeeze your thigh, it engages your quads. Once your quads are engaged, it helps to keep the leg straight, so that when you then lift the leg, you're using your bottom rather than your hamstrings. Now, if you're really tight through your hamstrings, you might find it quite hard to lift the leg without the knee bending. So you can just stay with the foot on the floor and just keep squeezing your right thigh to lengthen the hamstrings, and then let the knee relax down on the floor. And it's best then keep working the hamstrings to lift the leg. Still thinking about your tummy, drawing the belly button up towards the back. Try and lengthen your leg as you lift. Try and notice as you're lifting your leg there's no change of position through the lower back. And hopefully no tension through your shoulders or your neck. So keeping those nice and relaxed. Just once more now with your left. And then you're going to lift both knees, so both legs are straight. Lift your right leg and then alternate. Now, as you're starting to alternate the legs, you're squeezing the front of the thighs. You're trying to make sure your hips don't rock from side to side. And keeping your toes and your knees pointing down to the floor. And again, thinking about the tummy button, that little egg, nice and safe underneath your belly. For 5, 4, 3, 2, and your 1, and rest. Relax the knees. There's your swimming legs, now the swimming arms. From here, we're going to bring the elbows out to 90 degrees. We're still in neutral spine, so we're trying to keep our core connected to keep the back, lower back in neutral. And then from here, we're going to lift the upper body. Eye gaze stays down to the floor. Arms lift. You're going to reach forward, pull the arms back. They come under, and then you ease down. So we lift forehead, both elbows, reaching forward. Big circle with the arms, like you're swimming. Hands tuck under, and you ease back to the ground. Breathing in. Breathing out to pull back, and a breath in as you lower down. So we're still working on that mobility and movement through the shoulders, but we're also working on the stability through the spine and our core. We're trying not to use the lower back to lift. And if you keep gently drawing the tailbone down and the belly button up to the back, that's going to keep this lower back in this position. So that when we do lift, it creates more extension through the upper back. And if you've been spending a lot of time at desks, sat forward, reading, driving more, that's where the upper back becomes more rounded and the lower back has to do more work. So this is a way of trying to almost let your lower back switch off. Use your two muscles to hold the lower back in neutral, And let that lift come through the upper back. And then ease in down gently. So I'm sure you know what's coming next. You can either work with a single leg lift, or you can come into a double leg lift. Let's start with a single. Right knee lifts. Lift your right leg as you lift your upper body. Still holding the belly button away from the ground, just circle the arms. And then ease down. And again, left knee lifts. Squeeze the bottom to lift that left leg. And then you're probably starting to notice it's a little bit harder to not squash that little egg under your belly button. That constant feeling of your core first. And just lift to the point where you feel you're able to keep the belly button slightly lifted. And you don't get that sensation that you're forcing your belly back into the ground. And if you're feeling strong, double legs, last 4. Breathe in, out with the lift. Breath in as you reach forward, out breath to pull back, and a breath in to release. And if you feel you need less at any point, you can work with just the arms or just your legs. Try not to look forward. So always keeping the eye gaze down to the floor. And you'll probably find that your forehead only lifts an inch or 2 off the ground. And that's going to make sure you're keeping neutral rather than lifting higher and taking it in to your lower back. The good thing is when you finish that last one, you get to do your reverse press up. So the hands come by the ribs, your elbows squeeze in. Push the hands into the ground. Bring the knees in underneath your hips. And then from here, just take a cat stretch. Push the crown of the head forward. But with your cat stretch, you're going to start the tailbone tucking under and then rolling through to your upper back and looking towards your knees. And then pushing the crown of the head forward and looking towards the ceiling. Tailbone first. Again, trying to encourage the movement through each vertebrae. It's not always easy. You may find that some vertebrae move as 2 or 3 together. So try and roll, tuck one vertebrae then the next. And to help get that rolling sensation, when you come into neutral spine, try and keep your back nice and long. Feel like the crown of the head's being pulled forward as you tuck your tailbone under. This time we're going to come into neutral position and stay here in the centre. Now we're going to take the legs further back. Back to where we're getting our plank. And this time we're going to lift both knees if we can. If you prefer, one knee down and then the other knee. If you can with me, lift one knee, then the other knee. Lengthen your spine, draw the tailbone to the heels. Now let one knee hover and then push back. The knee comes towards the floor and push back. So you're still pedaling through your feet. At the same time you're pressing through the hands, creating all the stability through the shoulders. Breathing into lower, out to push back. No movement through the upper body, keep pressing to the hands. Watch the heads not starting to drop. Lengthen so the ears and the shoulders stay in line. One more on each side. And then bring both knees down. Pull the hips back, tuck the tailbone under again. So as you sit back to your heels, take a nice big breath in. Feel like you're making the back of the ribs expand. And as you breathe out, just let the hips sink a little further back. A little bit of side work next. So when you're ready, coming onto the side, nice side lying position. And when you come into side lying, it's just aligning everything from the ears to the ankles, just like when we're standing. But this time the crown of the head, pull into the side wall, and we're going to start with a hip hitch. So the hip hitch is to get the movement between the ribs and the hips here, and to really make us aware of how we hold our pelvis when we move the legs. So as we settle, you can have your underneath arm extended or your arm forward with the head on the block. Top shoulder rolls back first, draw it down to the back of the ribs so the ear and the shoulders aligned. Now tailbone gently tucks, So that pulls the tummy muscles in and it lengthens the lower back. Place your hand on your hip, find your hip bone. Now you're going to pull your hip up towards your rib and then you're going to push the leg away. And you'll feel your hip moves up towards the rib cage and then push that top leg away and you feel the hip moves away from the rib. Breathe in, pull it up. Breathe out, push away. So you can physically feel the hip bone moving. Still thinking about the ribs, so the ribs stay down and you're not allowing the ribs to flare forward as you push that top leg away. Now as you push that top leg away a little bit more, you might also find a little stretch on the underneath side. On your next one, we add in the leg lift. So you push the leg away, keep the hip here, and then you're using the outer thigh to lift, lower, and hip back to rib. So you're pushing away, that switches on the stability muscles just between the ribs and the hips in the lower back. Breathe in hip to rib, breathe out leg longer and lifts. In through the nose, out through the mouth to lengthen, keep breathing out for that lift. Now this time as you push the leg away, you're going to keep the hip here and just work with the leg raise. So you start to feel the deeper muscles holding for stability. So the hips now not moving up and down towards the ribs. The muscles in the lower back are stabilising the ribs and the hips. Then all the lift has to come from here. If you let your hip move up to your rib when you lift the leg, the movement's initiated from here and these muscles aren't stabilising because they're not keeping this bit still. So to help keep that bit still, keep trying to lengthen as you lift. And use the out breath so it draws the tummy muscles in. Give me 3 more here. For 2. And your last one. And rest. Still keep that hip pushed away from the rib. Now lift your top leg so it's just in line with your hip. Hold, and then bring your bottom leg up to your top leg and ease both legs down. Lengthen and lift. Hold it, not too high, because you want to be in a position where you can squeeze your thighs together and then ease the legs down as one. Breathe out, in as you hold. Out to squeeze the legs together. Breath in to release. Think about that gap here. Try and keep as much space between the ribs and hips as you can. Breathe in. Out with the first lift, breathe in and hold, breathe out, squeeze the legs together and a breath in to release as one. Last 2. If you prefer, you can have the hand on the floor, I forgot to mention that bit. But you're all looking fine. That's why we're going to do both legs together. So keep the feet together, lower halfway and lift. But again, it's not a big lift because you're trying to keep this bit still. Breathe out with each lift and a breath in as you come to your hover. Ribs and hips still connected. For 5, 4, 3, 2, and your last one. And rest. Try it on the other side. So when you're ready, a little roll over onto the opposite side. Start in that perfect lying down posture. And as you lie down, just lining ankles to ears. Sometimes if you have a glance down and look at your feet, if you can see your knees, your legs are way too far forward. And if you can't see your toes, the legs are probably a little bit too far back. And if the legs are too far back, it naturally arches into the lower back. So once everything's aligned, roll the shoulders back first. The ribs, so we're thinking about the upper abs, holding the rib cage in place. Tuck in under the tailbone so it creates the length in the lower back and connection to your core. And then we just let the hip do the work. So hand onto the hip slides to rib, and then push away. So again, just feel the hip moving towards the rib cage and the leg pushing away. Breathing as the hip slides up and then breathing out to push away. So again, these are really important muscles in our lower back that we don't always activate and use properly. And sometimes they get quite tight, especially if you carry a bag on one particular side. So by just doing this little exercise, it helps get that even balance through both sides of that lower back. Then once you've got that movement, push away and lift. Pull hip to rib, push the hip away and lift. Now breathe in, out to push, and keep breathing out with that lift. So you should find when you get to the point where you're ready to lift your leg, that bottom rib is just ever so slightly lifted away from the ground. So that when you lift the top leg, you don't feel the rib cage dropping back to the floor. So it almost puts your spine in a little sag, like so. If you keep that bottom rib lifted, when you push that top leg away, that's got the spine nice and lengthened. So once more, keeping the hip away this time, so the hip no longer moves, it stays here. Imagine you've got a glass of water balanced on your hip. Start thinking about the knee and the toe. Sometimes the knee starts to turn up to the ceiling. As soon as you rotate your legs, the knee's pointing up, you're working different muscles, you're working more into your quads. We want to keep that foot facing forward, so we're getting the out thigh muscles, these that create the stability. They create stability around the knee. So a lot of times when knees are weak, the inner thighs get stronger and they pull the knee inwards. So again, we really want to make sure that work's staying here through the out thigh. And again, that foot position makes such a big difference. Still thinking about that bottom rib though at the same time. Breathing out with each lift. And your last one. We're going to come into that double leg lift, so holding. Top leg lifts not as high, bottom leg comes together, and then easing down as one. Out with the lift, squeeze together, and ease down. Can you do that and still not let that bottom rib push into the floor? So start that bottom rib lifted by pushing that top leg away. And again, the movement might be small, which is fine. And it's better to do a smaller movement than work into different muscles. Well, hopefully feeling the outer thigh definitely doing some work. I will tell you when I smile it hurts, because with all the lumps on my head, the skin's that tight. When I smile it pulls all across my head. So I'm trying not to smile too much. That's a grimace. And your last two. And if you weren't tuned in earlier, my head hurts because I dropped a brick on it yesterday. Luckily it didn't do any damage to the brick. Rest there. When you're ready, roll over, come face down onto the floor. Just let your hands sit by your shoulders. Roll the shoulders back. Come back into neutral spine, so you're going to softly draw the tailbone to the heels, the feet a little bit wider than the hips. Now you're going to push your ribcage forward. Then peel your forehead and your breastbone off the floor, but keep drawing your tailbone down towards your heels. And then ease down when you're ready. It's really easy to stay here and look forwards, but the only thing you've moved and worked into is the neck. We're going to try and keep that chin tucked in, like you've got a little golf ball or a tennis ball tucked between the chin and the chest. Lengthen through the back of the neck, and then let the forehead lift. And try and feel the lift comes through the upper back. So what we're trying to feel again is that the tailbone stays drawn to the heels, so we're keeping that space between the ribs and the hips here, and encouraging the lift through the upper back. We are naturally a lot more flexible lifting through that upper back, especially again if you're a little bit more rounded through the upper back. The muscles through the upper back are lengthened and weakened, and it's much harder to try and lift. So it's much easier then to let the lower back do the work. So just think about your next few. Keep lengthening, pulling the crown of the head forward and tailbone back. So you can keep your eye gaze to the floor and see how far you can lift without squashing your egg. And that's the best way you can encourage movement and strength through the upper back. And still working through your core, because you're not allowing that lower back to move. You're drawing the tailbone down towards the heels. And one last time. And I think your pleasure is almost complete. From here, settling. Bring your right hand forward, let your head rest. Take a hold of your left foot. Square your hips into the floor. So you might find when you take your left foot, your left hip comes off the ground. So your back's twisting a little to try and get into the foot. That's happening. Just think about gently pressing your left hip bone back into the ground, or holding the back of your trousers or maybe your sock rather than taking the foot. Lengthen, pull the crown of the head forward, draw the tailbone towards the heels, and see if you can gently encourage the heel towards the bottom. Now again, sometimes if you're a little tight, you'll feel your lower back really wants to arch. So again, draw the tailbone back. Imagine that little egg again back underneath your belly button. Try and give it a little bit more space, lift the belly button a little bit more. Again, that brings you more stretch down through the front of your thigh. And then when you've had enough of that stretch, you can just simply release. Left hand comes forward, take a hold of your right foot, your sock, back of your trousers. But again, when you take the foot, you might find the weight rocks over onto your left hip. So just give your right hip bone a little press back into the ground. Draw the tailbone towards the heel. Again, that might be enough. And just hold into that stretch. Or gently drawing the belly button a little higher away from the ground. And as you feel you're pulling the belly button off the floor, again, you should hopefully feel more stretch down the front of your thigh. Lots of breath, feel the muscles relax. And then release when you're ready. Hands come again back by the ribs. You're going to squeeze the elbows back so the shoulder blades come together. Lengthen the neck, eye gaze down, push into the hands and push off the floor if you can. Walking the hands back under the shoulders. From here, just keep the upper body still, the rib cage. We're going to stretch the muscles that we just worked in the lower back. So you wag your tail from side to side. So your right hip bone moves towards the rib. And then your left hip bone towards the rib. And it's the same movement that we've done while we're lying down. We're creating space between the ribs and the hips at either side of the spine. But as you're doing this, you're going to press into the hands and trying to make sure the head, the shoulders and the rib cage aren't rocking from side to side. And a couple more each way. Keeping that tailbone gently tucked under. So it gives you a little bit more space into that lower back. Now you can rest somewhere in the middle. Tuck under your toes, lift the knees, walk back with the hands, and see if you can bring the heels back to the ground. If that feels uncomfortable, come up the best way you can, and let the hands slide towards the toes. You can pop the elbows straight onto the thighs. If you're here, you can bend your knees more to let yourself flex forward. We tend to, again, try and look forward. Try and look back between your thighs, back towards your knees. So it's the crown of the head that hangs to the floor. The belly button's pulling up to the back, so it supports the back. Think about the roll of the spine on your way up. Bend the knees as much as you need to. Keep that chin tucked in now towards your chest as long as you can. You're going to tuck under your tailbone first. Belly's jointed back, and one vertebrae, then the next. Just rolling up, keeping the chin tucked in. Coming into neutral spine as soon as possible. And just letting that stretch and movement come through the upper back. Until the head rises and the shoulders get to melt down. And then as you come back into set position, shoulder blades draw down, hands by your thighs, tailbone tucks under, and then just let your upper body turn to the right, and then to your left. Hip bones stay forward, so you're not letting the knees or the feet rock, you're setting concrete. As you bring your left hand to your right hip, gently pull that right hip forward. And same with your left. Sometimes when you turn, the hip wants to turn as well. So if you let your hand come onto your hip and almost pull the hip forward, and then pull the left shoulder back, you're going to feel much more stretch through the spine. Once more over to your left. Stay nice and tall, and then resting in the centre, shrugging up the shoulders, and letting them go. And breathing in, and releasing And once more. And applauding yourselves, as always. Nice gentle start back into it, for me that is.